an extremely timely forum. I believe we share the view that pursuing a greener post-pandemic recovery and transformation is more than a necessity, but a must-do. We are therefore grateful to have this amazing opportunity provided by the 15th Global Forum on Human Settlements to address the major challenges that concern this and future generations. The following two-day forum will be centered around post-pandemic recovery and transformation towards resilient cities and a healthy planet. That resonates greatly with the recommendations in the UN policy brief, COVID-19 in an Urban World, and discuss specific issues through 9 thematic sessions. The key topics include preserving and sustainably managing biodiversity and guaranteeing ecological security, integrated climate, hydrology, and environment services for sustainable cities, building urban resilience to climate change, financing for resilient infrastructure, smart sustainable cities and communities, adaptable buildings and resilient cities, post-crisis healthy and anti-fragile cities, blue economy and healthy ocean, blockchain technology and smart urban governance, energy efficient and sustainable housing, as well as a resilient, inclusive, gender equal, and a green economic recovery. So the 2 conference rooms will be opened up. All plenary session, except for the closing, and the thematic session A will be taking place in conference room A. Thematic session B and a summary and recommendation will be in conference room B. So please refer to the agenda for more details. So we look forward to your valuable insights and be part of the solutions, engagement and contribution. Without further ado, I'm honored to invite Dr. Malenkova, Deputy Secretary General of World Meteorological Organization, to chair the opening session. Dr. Malenkova, the floor is yours.
Christina, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the 15th sectional session.
Dr. Malenkova, we cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone who is joining us today for the 15th Global Forum on Human Settlements. On behalf of the co-organizers, my fellow organizations who put this forum together, I'm very pleased to welcome distinguished speakers of the session today, but everyone else who is following the forum over these days, city practitioners, experts, international organizations, anyone who would like to contribute to the solution. The COVID pandemic generated a large international health and economic crisis worldwide, and it will probably take years to recover. But it's critical to remember that climate change will continue to pose an increasing threat to human lives, ecosystems, economies, and societies for centuries to come can be treated as a recovery measure of COVID pandemic. Especially this is the case for the cities and human settlements, because air pollution, extreme events, extreme temperatures, disasters, and ecologic problems in the cities are more pronounced and posing more threat to people. So recovery from COVID pandemic is an opportunity to move forward along a more sustainable path towards resilience and adaptation on climate change. Of course, I cannot not quote the words of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said, now is the time to rethink and reshape the urban world. Now is the moment to adapt to reality of this and future pandemics. And now is our chance to recover better by building more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I am welcoming the chairman of the Global Forum, Ambassador Chaudhry, to start opening session. Ambassador Chaudhry, over to you.
Ambassador, please unmute yourself.
It's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for your comments and for inviting me to speak. In my capacity as the chairman of the Global Forum on Human Settlements, I extend a very warm welcome to all the participants at this 15th Global Forum on Human Settlements, conveniently called GFHS 2020. This annual gathering focusing on the new urban agenda with wide-ranging participation of variety of stakeholders from various parts of the globe is taking place for the first time as a virtual event because of the continuing global pandemic bringing immense varied challenges to humanity and to our planet. At the outset, let me say how much I appreciate and value the presence of Professor Vandana Shiva, a fellow South Asian and an eminent and wise global leader who is admired by all. I'm looking forward eagerly to listen to her inspiring words. I'm particularly delighted that a number of key multilateral voices would be joining us to share their wisdom and activism with the forum participants. Among them are Professor Petteri Thalas, Secretary General of WMO, Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary of UNFCCC. I recall we were colleagues at the UN as delegates. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, Executive Secretary of the Biodiversity Convention, Shenzhen Zhang, President of IUCN, and longtime well-wisher of GFHS, Shamshad Akhtar, former Executive Secretary of UN ESCAP. Last but not the least, I'm also joined by my GFSS colleagues, Taj Hamad, our dear Vice Chairman, and Lu Haifeng, our dynamic Secretary General. As the preparation for GFHS 2020 was in full swing, the United Nations launched its latest report titled, as our moderator and opening announcement said, it is called Policy Brief COVID-19 in an Urban World on 28th of July this year, providing constructive guidance for responding more efficiently and effectively to the pandemic, building back better and greener, and enhancing urban resilience, inclusiveness, and sustainability. As the GFSS chairman, I issued a statement on 3rd of August 2020 asserting that, and I quote from that statement, as an UN-accredited global non-profit organization, the Global Forum on Human Settlements welcomes very warmly and extends its strongest support to this policy brief. GFHS resonate greatly with the views of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, that cities have proved to be ground zero the world over for the COVID-19 pandemic, and leaders everywhere urgently need to rethink and transform cities to respond to the reality of COVID-19 and potential future pandemics. In responding to the pandemic, the first line of business is to tackle inequalities and safeguard social cohesion. Second, we must strengthen the capacities of local governments. Third, we must pursue a green, resilient, and inclusive economic recovery. The statement has been shared with the Executive Office of the Secretary General in New York. Over the past 15 years, GFHS has been providing a global platform for high-level dialogue on urban issues and promoting sustainable cities and human settlements for all, which is also in line with the recommendations of the policy brief of the UN. With the objective of undertaking a timely and effective opportunity to implement this policy brief, GFHS 2020 has been convened in incorporating an observance of Urban October with the theme, and I quote, post-pandemic recovery and transformation, colon, resilient cities, healthy planet, end of quote. It is co-organized by GFHS in partnership with World Meteorological Organization, International Union for Conservation of Nature, International Telecommunications Union, and International Science Council. In collaboration with UNDRR, UNDP, UNESCAP, UNECE, ADB, World Oceans Council, and other international organizations. This forum aims at calling on the international community to draw lessons from the pandemic and accelerate green transformation, to promote biodiversity conservation, to strengthen urban safety and resilience, with special focus on the needs of women and girls and children, and to strengthen the capacity of local authorities and foster partnership towards achieving the SDGs. You would recall that following the adoption of the new urban agenda by Habitat 3 in 2016 in Quito, Ecuador, the mission of GFHS was tailored as, and I quote, committed to sustainable cities and human settlements for all, end of quote. 2020 also marks the 15th anniversary of the establishment of the Global Forum in 2005. I have the pleasure of being its chairman since 2007. On the occasion of this special anniversary, I am delighted to announce that GFHS, along with its partners, have decided to co-produce a depository of the wide-ranging and huge array of academic literature as the Library of the Global Forum on Human Settlements, which will be bilingual in Chinese and English. This is also a part of our contribution to the global commencement of the Decade of Actions on the SDGs in its final 10 years. The library is planned to be launched towards the end of this year. In my remarks today, I would present a broader perspective of the human settlements agenda in a global setting. At the outset, let me assert the centrality of sustainability in all our endeavors and initiatives for global development, progress, and prosperity. Sustainable development is the fundamental intergenerational responsibility of our society's efforts, which benefits all, including our planet as a whole. We are experiencing in reality the beginning of a new urban era. It is projected that globally urbanization levels will rise dramatically in the next 35 years to reach 70% by 2050. We thus live at a time of unprecedented, rapid, irreversible urbanization. Urban growth is most rapid in the developing world, where cities gain an average of 5 to 6 million residents every year. As cities grow in size and population, harmony among the spatial, social, and environmental aspects of a city and between their inhabitants becomes of paramount importance. UN has said rightly that our struggle for global sustainability will be won or lost in cities. Urbanization offers unprecedented opportunities for increasing living standards, life expectancy, and literacy levels, environmental sustainability, and more efficient use of increasingly scarce natural resources. For women, urbanization is associated with greater access to employment opportunities, lower fertility levels, and increased independence. Yet, urbanization does not necessarily result in a more equitable distribution of wealth, well-being, and opportunity. In many low and middle-income countries, urban poverty is growing compared to rural poverty. A gendered perspective of urban poverty highlights fundamental issues of inequality and social justice. By showing women's unequal position in the urban labor market, their limited ability to secure assets independently from male relatives, and their greater exposure to violence. While slums continue to grow in most developing countries, reinforcing other forms of inequality, urban planning requires a shift from viewing urbanization mainly as a problem to seeing it as a powerful tool for development. Cities have the potential to shape the future of humankind and to win the battle for sustainable development. Cities are at the forefront of the global battle against climate change. In the last 2 decades, cities and urban centers have become the engine rooms of human development as a whole. UN has asserted that the way in which cities are planned, run, and managed is crucial. The leadership role of mayors and city governments is therefore of fundamental importance. All these are very succinctly articulated in Goal 11 of UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to make, and I quote, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, end of quote. But the international community really needs to do its best to achieve that goal by 2030. Let me conclude by underscoring that sustainable urban development is one of the most pressing challenges facing the human community in 21st century. As more and more people make cities their home, cities will be the arenas in which some of the world's biggest social, economic, environmental, and political challenges will be faced and need to be addressed. It is therefore significant that GFHS has since its establishment been focusing on these challenges at each of its annual conferences. GFHS 2020 is again another timely and relevant gathering that is aimed at making the international community alert and proactive. In conclusion, I reiterate the core message of Secretary General Guterres when he launched the policy brief in the following words. And coincidentally, our distinguished moderator has quoted from there also. Mine will be a repetition of that. Now is the time to rethink and reshape the urban world. Now is the moment to adapt to the reality of this and future pandemics. Now is our chance to recover better by building more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities. I thank you very much.
Distinguished Ambassador Chaudhry, I can't thank you more for your leadership and commitment, and actually for your passion in moving this forward, in moving this forum forward. Thank you very much for putting this together, for your insights. And now I have a special pleasure to now invite to speak WMO Secretary General, Professor Petri Talas, who just earlier this week released another important report, 2020 Climate Services report, which is still having huge resonance in the media. Professor Talas, over to you.
Thank you, Elena, and dear ambassadors, dear excellencies, it's a pleasure to speak here. And since I'm representing a scientific and technical organization, I will show you some facts slides about climate change disasters and how they are related to urban environments and how the future might look like. And of course, this is a very actual topic, since growing amount of the global population, they are living in cities, and the impacts of both disasters and climate change, they are felt more effectively in such environments. I'm trying to share my screen and show you some slides. I hope that you can see my presentation now. Good. So, I will show you what we know about disasters, climate change, and how they are having impact on cities. So first of all, this is showing what has happened during the past 10 years. More than half of the world's population, they have been experiencing a major disaster. These are not only these kind of normal variations, but these are major disasters that are having major impacts on human lives and economies. And out of those, flooding has been the most frequent one. We have seen 2 billion inhabitants who have been exposed to flooding, and about 1.5 billion who have been exposed to drought. And that has been especially the case in Africa and some parts of Asia. And third is storms. And that's less than 1 billion inhabitants who have been experiencing severe storms, and they are typically hurricanes or typhoons. And if you look at the costs of these disasters for the past 10 years, you can see that USA has experienced the most expensive ones: Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Hurricane Harvey in 2017, and several others also in 2017. They have been very expensive. And but if you compare this with the size of the economies, the Caribbean 6 countries, they have been facing losses which have been up to 800% of their GDP. So eight years GDP has been lost because of an individual hurricane hit. And there have been also severe flooding events in Asia, in China and Thailand, as you can see here on the map. And typically these losses have been taking place in urban environments, not in the rural areas. And we have seen growth in the amount of these big disasters, and the blue areas here indicate the flooding events, and green storm events, and these orange ones heat waves and drought. And in all of those cases, we have seen an increase, and this is partly related to climate change, but partly to the fact that we have a growing amount of population living on coastal areas where people are more exposed to these kind of events. And we have places which are not most favorable for human settlements. For example, New Orleans in USA is a city which has been exposed to these kind of events every 50 years in the history. And if you look at the map where these various events are taking place, you can see that, for example, that Africa is very sensitive to drought events, and that's the case also on the west coast of United States and Mediterranean region, whereas in Asia we have more often flooding-related events. And then we have storm-related areas. That's very much eastern part of United States and Caribbean area, and also east coast of Asia. And we have seen both human losses and economic losses. And as I said, economic losses have been largest in North America, and second largest losses have been observed in Asia. And we have seen also human losses. And for example, in Europe in 2010, there were 50,000 casualties in Russia because of heat wave and severe forest and heat fires. And in 2003, there were severe heat wave hitting Central Europe, and there were more than 70,000 casualties. So also rich European countries are facing this problem. And again, the casualties have mainly been seen in urban environments. We have seen changes in the global precipitation patterns. Typically, we have more rain at the high northern latitudes and also some high southern latitudes, whereas, for example, Africa and central parts of Asia have been exposed, and the Middle East have been exposed to more severe drought events. Global glaciers are melting, and there has been a boost in this melting during the past decades, and these glaciers are also a source of fresh water for main rivers in Asia, in India, China, USA, Peru as examples. And the less we have ice mass, the less we will have water for the rivers. And water stress is already a global challenge. You can see colors on this map, and you can see that Southwestern Asia and Southern Asia is one of the areas. Also Eastern Asia and China, that's a challenge. And we have recently seen severe forest fires in Western United States, and you can see that that's also indicated here on the map. And then one of the challenges that we are going to face is population growth, and this means also more population in the urban areas, and you can see that water and population growth they are a problem which is connected, and in 2050 we expect to see major problems in Africa, in some parts of Asia like in Pakistan, for example. This is going to be a severe challenge, and also some of the Middle East countries. We have seen a 1.1 degree warming globally so far, and we have seen more severe warming taking place in the Arctic area, and this is already causing problems for the Arctic infrastructures. There are many cities and infrastructures that are built on permafrost, and once the permafrost is melting, the infrastructures are also collapsing. That's happening in Alaska, in Canada, and also in Russia especially. We have growing amount of population who are exposed to heat waves, and according to World Health Organization in 2019 we had 220 million people who were exposed to heat waves, and this is very much hitting urban population. And the Arctic changes, they're having impacts on weather patterns worldwide. We have started seeing more often cold spells in Northern Hemisphere, and also summer heat waves because of the changes in the Arctic, and these phenomena are more stagnant nowadays. Sea level rise is threatening several coastal cities. We have seen so far 26 centimeters sea level rise, and there has been a boost in the sea level rise during last decades, and there's a risk to see half meter to 1 meter sea level rise according to conservative estimates by the end of this century. But if the Antarctic melting takes place more quickly, then we could see even 2.5 meters sea level rise by the end of this century. And this change continues until next century anyhow, because of the inertia of the Earth system. Here you can see cities and areas which are vulnerable to this sea level rise, and this is an estimate for 2060s. And you can see that it's plenty of Asian cities here: China, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, India, and Thailand, and also Pakistan, and some cities also elsewhere: Lagos, London, Istanbul, Rio de Janeiro, Lima, New York, and Los Angeles as examples. So this is again a very much urban problem. And because of warmer sea waters, we have been warming the oceans by half centigrade so far, and we don't expect to see growing amount of tropical storms, but we expect to see more often most intense ones, category 4 and 5 hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons, and this is again felt in urban areas. Air quality is one of the challenges that we are facing, and this is the upper panel. We have ultrafine particles, PM2.5, and you can see that, for example, China, eastern part of China is fairly polluted, and also in northern parts of India we have major challenges. Some of these colors are indicated to dust coming from, for example, Sahara and some deserts. And also in Europe we have lots of color, and you can see the European map below, and we can see that, for example, Eastern Europe and the Po Valley in Italy, we have high exposure to that to these particles. Coronavirus has had a positive impact, short-term positive impact on air quality. Here is an example from China. What was the situation last year in January, and what was the situation during the COVID lockdown in January, and there was a short-term temporary improvement in air quality. And finally, what is our climate scenario for the future? We have two options. If you look at the Paris Agreement, 1.5 degree, which is more favorable for the well-being of human beings and the biosphere, and we should bend this emission growth curve in the coming 5 years and become carbon neutral by 2050 to be, if we would like to reach this low limit of Paris Agreement, and if we would like to reach the upper limit of Paris Agreement, we have 25 years time to bend this curve, and we should become carbon neutral by 2070. And I would like to congratulate the government of China for the announcement that the UN General Assembly to aim at becoming carbon neutral by 2060. And if we don't do anything, we could reach 3 to 5 degrees warmer planet by the end of this century. And our challenge is to convert our energy system, our transport system, and our way of living to become more less dependent on fossil energy. At the moment, 85% of the global energy for industry, for general energy production and transport, they are based on fossil energy, coal, oil, and gas, and only 15% is based on nuclear, hydro, and renewables. And we should convert this. We should reverse those numbers. We should produce most of our energy based on nuclear, hydro, and renewables to be successful in climate mitigation. So my conclusions. So we have growing amount of population living in cities, and the amount of megacities is growing, and urban areas, they're more sensitive to climate change and disasters. air quality is a special challenge, and quite often we have events when we have heat waves and very poor air quality at the same time. And this cocktail is very dangerous for, especially for old population and those people who are having some special diseases. It's the same as for the COVID, I would say. In climate mitigation, there's a chance to reach some win-wins. We can reduce the carbon emissions, and we can also improve the air quality locally. And we have means for that, and these means are not very dramatic. They don't mean very dramatic changes in our behavior. We could start favoring more electric transportation, biking, which was common in China in the past. We could use renewable energy for and nuclear energy for producing energy. And besides that, we need to adapt to climate change. So we have to cope with the heat problems in the future. This negative trend will continue for the coming decades, and we have to deal with flooding and also coastal flooding, sea level rise, and we have to start saving water and recycling water, because we will have lack of water in some parts of the world, and also we have to face this coastal inundation challenge. With these words, thanks for the opportunity to address you, and thanks for the organizers for organizing this very important event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tallas. Thank you, Petri. It's amazing that you were able to give highlights of the report and on the scientific evidence which WMO routinely produces for policymakers and for the citizens. So it's really, really important that we speak based on the science, and that's coming the very beginning of the forum. Thank you very much for this indeed. And now I move to our fellow partner and co-organizer, International Telecommunication Union. I'm pleased to give the floor to the Deputy Secretary General, Malcolm Johnson. Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Elena. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all participants. It's my pleasure on behalf of ITU to add my welcome to you to this 15th annual session of the Global Forum on Human Settlements. The first virtual session due to these extraordinary circumstances. So we're very pleased to once again join forces with the GFHS and the other co-organizers of the event. Last year, we had the opportunity to organize and participate in a number of panel discussions during the 14th annual session in Addis Ababa. And of course, although the circumstances are very different this year, we're still very happy to build on the success of that conference and continue to draw attention to the important topics that can benefit the human kind around the world, especially during these difficult circumstances in the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking at how we can recover from this, and especially looking at the challenges for sustainability and climate change, which of course will remain with us long after COVID-19, and are very worrying, as we've seen from the slides from the Secretary General of WMO. The pandemic has brought unprecedented challenges for cities and citizens around the world, and information and communication technologies, ICTs, have been playing a crucial role and will continue to play a crucial role in mitigating these challenges. During the pandemic, ICTs have given millions of people the ability to connect with family and friends, continue to work or study from home, and access to the essential public services, in particular, of course, healthcare. ICTs are providing the backbone for delivering healthcare information and providing access to health care assets. It's not surprising that the demand for broadband and digital traffic has extended tremendously during the last 6 months. But we know that half of the world's population, around 3.6 billion people, remain offline. And having access to affordable internet remains a huge challenge for many. The lack of digital skills and awareness are key barriers to the take-up of internet, but also, of course, the lack of relevant content in the local language. The experience of this pandemic has made it evident to all that digital infrastructure and connectivity are crucial to building social, economic, and environmentally sustainable cities that are more resilient to pandemics and similar crises in the future, and can accelerate post-pandemic recovery efforts and the full implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. As the UN Specialized Agency for ICTs, let me tell you a bit about some of ITU's activities in this area. We're working very closely with our membership and partners to ensure the development of international standards, harmonized spectrum, and coordinated satellite orbits that can handle the huge increase in digital traffic driven by the pandemic, help cities to future-proof their digital capabilities and infrastructure, and ensure that digital services are accessible to all. International standards and harmonized spectrum ensure interoperability of equipment and services provided by different vendors and operators, and reduce costs through the economies of scale. And they protect the essential services such as the meteorological service and the Earth surveillance satellites. Early this year, ITU launched the Global Network Resiliency Platform. This brings together regulators, policymakers, and other relevant stakeholders to share information and insights on initiatives and measures that have enabled network operators and platform providers to cope with the huge increase in demand as a result of COVID-19. Thanks to them, like so many other organizations, ITU has been able to continue its activities through working from home and virtual meetings and conferences. The introduction of flexible working methods has proved to be highly effective, and virtual meetings have enabled more of our membership to participate in our meetings, making them more inclusive and with better geographic balance. In ITU, we are fortunate to have a diverse membership of 193 governments, but uniquely over 900 sector members, and these are mostly private sector companies from the telecom and internet sectors. But we also have a large academia membership, civil society, and a range of other regional and international organizations. Membership is our unique strength, so their increased participation in our work is an important benefit to the organization and to the membership. We also work with an increasing variety of partners, and none more so at this critical time than the WHO, with whom we are developing standards on e-health, including the use of AI for health. And we've created a focus group on environmental efficiency for artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. And this is open to any interested party and is one of the first global platforms dedicated to studying the standardization requirements for sustainable AI, blockchain, 5G, and other new technologies. And these technologies are key enablers for enhancing operational efficiency of urban complexities and infrastructure and improving access to essential services. To support cities in their digital transformation, ITU is a suite of international standards that promote a global transition towards a circular economy, emphasizing energy efficiency and recycling. ITU initiated the United for Smart Sustainable Cities collaboration with UNECE and UN Habitat, which is now supported by another 13 UN agencies and programs, working to help achieve Sustainable Development Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. This collaboration is known as UN4SSC, It's part of the work going on to develop benchmarking tools to allow prospective smart sustainable cities to measure their progress. The latest deliverables include a guide to circular cities and accelerating cities transformation using frontier technologies. And most recently, it's created a thematic group that focuses on examining the economic and financial measures taken by cities in response to COVID-19. So I encourage you all to reach out to UN for SSC and learn more. So being an optimist, I like to think that something good will come out of this pandemic. Among the silver linings, as we've heard, global carbon emissions have reduced and are projected to be 7% less in 2020 than 2019. There are also reports of nature coming back into some cities and huge improvements in the air quality. Yet we know that this dramatic fall in carbon emissions is not going to have any lasting impact on climate change if we don't act on the lessons learned from this pandemic and build back better. That's why it's important that we do not lose sight of the climate challenge, the Paris Agreement, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So in the next 2 days, we'll have the opportunity to learn more about how cities can be made more resilient and achieve a green recovery after the pandemic. International collaboration, cooperation, and coordination will be the key to ensuring that cities achieve these goals by making the best use of the technology available. So I wish you a very enjoyable and fruitful 2 days, and once again thank GFHS and all the other co-organizers for helping bring this amazing event together. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to moderating a panel later today on the importance of standards for smart sustainable cities. So I hope to see you there. Thank you very much.
Malcolm, I'm missing this possibility to give you a round of applause, so I will try to do it at least on my side. Look, it's really vital what you're doing. I mean, connectivity and ICT were always important, but this last few months of this year showed that it's just vital. We can't live without this. This forum would not have happened if not the connectivity. Thanks to ITU, huge thanks for all the work you're doing to keep people connected. So really nice. Right now, it's a blood system of all our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you, and I look forward to your session later today. So we have 2 more speakers for the opening session, and now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Akhtar, welcome. A microphone, please. You probably need to check your microphone. I can't hear you.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So good morning from Karachi City. And I am the former UNESCAP Executive Secretary, not the current one, just to qualify. Thank you so much, Elena, and everybody else who have spoken. It's been very inspiring, and like others, we are all inspired by the Secretary General's message as well as the brief that you have circulated. I think a lot has been said. Let me start by stating that if anywhere battle for global sustainability and climate change is to be won, it will be in the urban areas. However, as has been articulated very effectively, challenges for urbanization are phenomenal. And we saw this in midst of COVID-19, where businesses have been hurt because of the lockdown. The health facilities are creaking in urban centers. We are actually in midst of large ungovernable cities high population densities, very prone to epidemic infections, and there is a proliferation of slums and weak infrastructure. Yeah, this is all fertile ground for epidemic to spread, and we have to be prepared for pandemics, but we have to be prepared for the next worst disaster that will hit the globe, and we have seen graphic illustrations of that in the excellent presentation from WMO. So there have been, post-COVID, there have been growing calls for green, socially sustainable recovery to build back better, drawing on lessons learned from pandemic and other disasters. Will we be able to achieve this? I believe we need to really take a moment to reflect that in order to incur the cost related to the massive expansion in urbanization that we are to be yet witness this world globally, we will have 6 billion people in 2045. This is going to widen the sustainable development goals gaps. How will we catalyze jobs for old and new additions to workforce? How to strike balance between sustainable growth and economic dynamism? Both are critical elements to reinforce sustainable development, knowing that more than 80% of the global GDP and 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are generated in cities, since 2/3 of global energy is consumed in these areas. And urban centers are not only congested, but there's a lot of informal, unplanned settlements. We have about 500 million urban residents that live in coastal areas in the world. We also have phenomenal coastal flooding that goes on. Karachi city just witnessed its worst flooding recently. So with all this, what is it that I'd like to focus on in my remarks? It's really related to finance. I personally, being an economist and a finance professional, I believe that if at all we will have the needle move, it'll have to be with the support of ample financing. And sustainable financing is what we would eventually need, which means that we would have to have really domestic resource mobilization in addition to leveraging of resources from multiple sources. So let me focus on few key points that I'd like to leave behind. One is cities indeed have great potential, but they require political commitment, they require vision, they require leadership, and they require investment prioritization, because as you just heard, there are so many problems from all our colleagues, but also SDGs 17 with so many targets. It's critical that we prioritize ourselves. So it's in this context, I must say I'm actually very impressed by how smart cities have evolved, and large proportion of this did exist in the Asia Pacific belt where I was operating. Smart cities stand out for a distinct economic niche they have nurtured for themselves, and I speak from my walkabout in Japan, in Korea, and so on and so forth, where smart cities stand out for distinct economic niche that has been nurtured for them by themselves, and they range from setting up of electronic hubs to IT industry, and opportunities that can be harnessed by integrating SDGs, nature-based solutions, deployment of frontier technologies we just heard to manage urban services, transport signaling system. You see a show of that in Songdo and rest of the Korean cities, where signaling systems have been put in place to measure the speed as well as control the accidents in this. There are energy efficiency and conservation solutions that are at work, but these are in pockets. Lots of cross-fertilization needed. My second point is the enormous rigidities that impact the cities with which city transformation can be executed. Pre-existing urban sprawl and age-old structures, weak institutions, and poor coordination among municipal bodies within a jurisdiction, legal rigidities that we all face within cities that can help arrest generational hold on land usage and dismantle the illegal settlements and squatters. And I talk to you from my personal experience in the city of 22 million, where you could do a lot, but you can touch a lot of things for fear that you could be kidnapped or you could be you could get into trouble. So we need to dismantle these rigidities, which don't require money, which requires really having the legal and political power to be able to do so. My third point is that cities are key for the future of climate action, with potential to bend the curve of emissions trajectories. And I say that because we are currently working on how to foster climate action. And there are a group of people who are working with me on that. I'm not representing any institution, but just as a civil society person trying to make a difference in figuring out what are the techniques that can be best used. Now, City Alliance's commitment to me is very impressive for climate action, but scale and speed of action has yet to take off. Impact on climate change and build-up of resilience at city level depends on local leadership and citizens' commitment and cooperation. So demands for climate-compatible investment are enormous. Public sector and municipal authorities' balance sheets do not have the firepower and capacity to fund the needed investments. Furthermore, from 2010 to 2016, according to OECD evidence, central government funding as a share of total municipal revenues fell by approximately 12% on average across all countries in the OECD belt. Now, if you were to look at what's happened during COVID, it's not only the federal taxation and levies that took a hit, but also municipalities that have taken a hit, and municipalities' tax bases have been already pretty low. So in this context, my suggestion is that we should really be looking at reforms of intergovernmental transfer system and municipal taxation reforms. We need to evolve because they're at the heart of everything that has been said so far. So they need to evolve, making more suitable and new criteria for divisible pools which go beyond the population criteria, and they should be leveraging resource transfers for subnational or sub-sovereign governments, and they should enhance action to reduce inequities and climate vulnerabilities. Obviously, we also need within all this a criteria to catalyze progress in SDGs. So what I'm talking about, incentivizing the intergovernmental transfers so that the sovereign or subnational governments are able to get more impetus to undertake the sustainability agenda that has been talked about. And in this context, we have to recognize that these are constitutional issues. So getting the right jurisdiction, getting the national finance commissions to be oiled now to be able to do the work that I have identified is very important. Now, the next is to be looking at the new modalities to raise resources. And that requires, of course, leveraging some of the local assets of the municipalities. And I think you know it all, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. The other point that I'd like to focus on is again on finance, because I thought it would be good to focus on finance since others will be talking about different things. So diversification, innovation, sustainable and long-term financing in funding is critical. Private capital today is abundant. It has capacity to meet almost 80 to 90% of funding requirements of the urban areas. Banks and DFIs balance sheets can only finance a proportion of the needs, but uptake can be enhanced by states' flexibility to facilitate sub-sovereigns' ability to leverage equity and debt financing from capital markets and long-term institutional investors' funding, because we need long-term financing. We could use ODA to leverage this funding, but I think central governments should have a special fund to do so. Investors, of course, have a unique opportunity now to deploy their capital in smart, urban, and climate resilient infrastructure. Trust me, this is a high paying and high return activity as I see. IFC has identified that such investment opportunities are in the range of almost 29.4 trillion in developing countries, and they are in the 6 urban sectors, which are remunerative sectors: renewable, public transportation, smart waters, so on and so forth. Now, with climate change magnifying, there has been knowledge generation and emergence of policy technological solutions, assets that are resilient and provide resilient solutions, and scaling is helping competitive pricing, which is supporting market growth and development and companies' returns. According to GSA 2019 survey, which I'm sure you've read, world's biggest companies, climate adaptation products and solutions have potential to enhance revenues in the range of 236 billion. So you can see there is money here and there. My final point, I have 2 final points. One is a proposal which has been talked about on financing, which is to develop a dedicated, there's several other initiatives on financing, but I'm going to zero on 2-3 areas. One is the concept of a green city development, which I'm sure you've looked at. It's been propagated by the ODI. It's also been propagated by World Bank, IFC. I believe you really need a body which is amply funded, which could leverage private capital and which knows how to read about this stuff. Green bonds, as we know, almost half of them have been issued by companies and some by sovereigns, and they have been snapped by sustainability-minded investors and is oversubscribed. And right now, the growth was quite high to about 250 billion, which is higher than last year. Now, the reason why I'm linking this with that is simply because we can attract capital, paid up capital for the green city development also if we design it effectively. Then a second thing is really what G20 has been talking about, which is the debt standstill. If we were to look at right now the over leveraging of the debt and the speed with which it's going on, it would be very difficult for us to have urban cities to go out and raise capital simply because if the sovereign's rating is affected, and we know that this is being already effective. There is an evidence in a recent book that has come out from the Suez Center with whom I have been affiliated, that it's going to get harder for climate finance unless and until we have effective credit rating and leveraging from the central. So what is it that we are looking for on the debt side? With surge in the debt, we would like to get more extension in the debt standstill, but direct this debt standstill delay in repayments into really debt swap facilities, climate swap facilities, which will help the urban centers. And that's a function that the green body could do very effectively if we were to pool effectively all these all the expertise required. So I'm going to stop here. I thought I would just zero in on financing for development because I don't see without that particular goal moving at a fast pace for any of the SDGs to move, but we do need cost-efficient structures. Thank you very much, Elena, and for UN Habitat for inviting me to speak.
Shamshad, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. You know, for me, you'll always remain the dearest member of the UN family. And today it was And thank you for staying with this forum and sharing your valuable experience and advice. You have so much to learn from you. Thanks indeed for this. So my last speaker on the list, it's also important organization, and I'm pleased to give the floor now to Dr. Susantono, Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development, Asia Development Bank. Thank you. Over.
Honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Manila. I am very honored to join this year's annual session of Global Forum on Human Settlements. Today, I would like to share with you an Asian perspective of the challenges we face and actions we can take to make our cities more livable in the post-pandemic new normal. Today's cities face many challenges, including rapid urbanizations, infrastructure deficit, climate change and disaster risks, aging societies, and emerging threats like cyber attacks and terrorism. COVID-19 clearly deepened these challenges, showing just how fragile the old normal was. The pandemic highlighted the glaring gaps in urban planning and development. Well before COVID-19 struck, many city dwellers were already living in overcrowded, unsafe, and unhealthy conditions. These were made worse by substandard housing and insufficient water, sanitation, and other basic services. Has found a natural incubator in the urban environment, with 90% of confirmed cases occurring in cities. The urban poor became particularly vulnerable, not having the financial means to ward off its impact. In developing Asia, where most of them are working in the informal sector, with no savings or social protection as a safety net, the lockdowns made it impossible for even their basic needs to be met. Did help with emergency stimulus packages, with suppliers or cash distributed through local and city governments. Beyond this, local authorities needed to devise urgent and decisive actions to increase everyone's safety from the virus. This was extremely critical in densely populated areas with much higher chances of spreading the disease. It made ADB view city resilience from a wider perspective. Given the variety of social and economic impacts, it is now clear that cities must ramp up resilience against the future spreads and effects of such diseases. ADB Long-Term Corporate Strategy 2030, approved in 2018, has 7 operational priorities to guide us in responding effectively to changing needs across Asia and the Pacific. The 4th operational priority, making cities more livable, is designed to make the region's cities more green, competitive, inclusive, and resilient. As we have seen over these past 8 months, there is no one-size-fits-all solutions or approach to a country pandemic response. Countries effectively deal with the immediate socio-economic damage, ADB published in August this year a guidance notes on how cities can prepare better and adapt to a new normal. This guidance was anchored on the core principles of ADB operational approach to urban development with the ultimate goal of making our cities more livable. The guidance notes, which can be accessed by anybody through our website, outline some of our recommendations for the new normal. To improve the coverage, quality, efficiency, and reliability of urban services, we propose 6 actions in this note. This is for greater inclusions to create better conditions and opportunities for the most vulnerable groups. Affordable and reliable access to services must be inclusive and sustainable. We can identify the specific needs of vulnerable people, such as women, the elderly, and the poor, and prepare programs that focus on social protections and greater economic opportunities and make core urban service available to vulnerable people at the same standards available to the general populations. This requires both adequate resources and the mechanisms to create jobs and boost livelihood. In addition, cities should work into their budgets private sector initiatives that help finance innovation and deliver services more efficiently. Second is to provide cities with better urban services and infrastructure using higher appropriate technologies and digital solutions effectively. Smart city digital solutions enable e-governance by providing platforms to improve accessibility to government services, increasing accountability, and facilitating participations in urban planning and governance processes. Technologies such as Earth observations and blockchains for land registry can also help strengthen domestic resource mobilizations through better land management, value capture, and efficient taxations. Along with these tools, cities also need to develop comprehensive policy and regulatory frameworks on data governance and privacy. Action 3 involves revisiting urban planning systems to strategically incorporate the lessons from COVID-19. Developing an integrated and coordinated approach among government agencies is essential. For example, analyzing and assessing the optimum urban density for various land uses can be coordinated between the national and subnational governments. This is crucial for balanced cities development. Find or re-identify the open and green spaces in collaboration with all stakeholders. Both physical activities and securing them is part of the bigger plans for innovative land and infrastructure development. Our fourth action is to strengthen the financial sustainability of cities and increase the governance capacity of various stakeholders. This requires crafting fiscal strategies that enable cities to maximize revenues and optimize expenditures. For this, cities must work with national governments to develop regulatory systems and mobilize the financial support needed for urban and social infrastructure. Success stories from different cities around the world in responding to the COVID-19 crisis or other disasters can be most helpful in this regard. Lessons and experience can be used to ensure a transparent, consistent, and coherent response across different levels of governments. However, such coordination should not be limited to government bodies only. Partnership with community-based groups are also essential to improve service delivery and ultimately to build the capacity of citizens. Under the new normal, we are reminded of the importance of building healthy and environmentally sustainable cities. This is the fifth recommended action. We can develop principles specific to each locality that define how to keep cities functioning in case of an economically disruptive event. This will need to do health impact assessment, prepare age-friendly plans, and conduct systematic thinking on what constitutes a healthy and environmentally sustainable city. For example, we need to promote energy efficiency to reduce demand for conventional energy sources and increase access to heating and cooling services for vulnerable groups. There is also a need to review processes for applying risk-sensitive land use management, nature-based solutions, circular economy, and low-carbon practices. Action 6 addresses how to build resilient cities, cities that can absorb shocks and stress due to pandemics, disaster, and climate change. Under the new normal, we need to think systematically about what makes a safe and resilient city and then mainstream this into urban governance. Post-pandemic cities also requires the climate resilience delivery of core urban services as well as effective disaster management and response plans. ADB is committed to working with our member countries as we transition to the new normal. Indeed, COVID-19 served as a wake-up call to revisit our urban development strategies. We need to work together, and I am confident that we can build cities that are inclusive, safe, sustainable, and resilient. We will continue to help cities tackle the challenges and build on opportunities. We will also support their visions and plans to build back better ensure a green and resilient recovery, and become more livable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Susantono. This brings us to the end of the opening session. I thank hugely all the speakers. Thank you very much. Look forward to the session ahead of us. And over to Christine to take us further. Thank you.